Hey everyone, it is Neil Milton here, General Manager of ChildSafe, and it is absolutely fantastic that you have chosen to join us today, or maybe later on when it's been in the ChildSafe Australia Facebook page and you are viewing it after this time. So I just want to say a massive welcome. Thank you so much for everything that you do as a parent, and we are so honoured to be with you today. We have an incredible Facebook Live that I'm really, really excited by. The first thing I want you to do is I want you to make sure that you put what state you're from and also maybe how many kids you have, something like that. That'll be really great. And just say hi, put an emoji on there, put a GIF on there, whatever you want to do. That'll be great just to let us know that you're there. We've got a bunch of people that are wanting to join us today, which we are really, really excited by. So first things first, as I said, my name's Neil, and ChildSafe is a not-for-profit harm prevention charity. We work with organisations to prevent harm and abuse of children, but we also work with parents to help support them in being a parent. And you and I both know, I'm a parent as well. I've got 3 amazing children, and you and I both know that there has been some really difficult times since about March with COVID. And if you're in Victoria, my heart goes out to you. I'm in Victoria as well, and I'm telling you now that it's quite a really tense environment at the moment because of the second lockdown, or lockdown 2.0, like I like to call it. So we want you to do something for us as well, and that is to make sure that you go to the ChildSafe Australia-for Parents page, and we can admit you into that. This is a particular group that we started to support parents and to empower them with information that's specifically for how to be a better parent, or any experts that might be able to come on and put some information on there to support you in that space. We also want you to go to childsafe.org.au/live, and that's where all the information for this Facebook Live and all the other monthly Facebook Lives are there. You can watch them on YouTube as well. Today is live on Facebook, but also on YouTube, and it's been shared a lot of times. So the other thing I wanted to let you know is that obviously at childsafe.org.au/live, you can actually make a donation. We often get parents saying to us, hey, look, this has been so fantastic. We believe in your organisation. How can I go about donating? What can I do to help you so that we can keep having these once a month with experts around helping me be a better parent? And so if you would like to do that, we're just asking if you want to give $10 if you're able to in this time. $10 goes a long way. It does cost a bit to be able to do this, but it gives the opportunity to be able to connect and to say that you're part of something greater than what you're going through now. So you are most welcome to do that. Now, I am so excited to announce our special guest in just a moment. She is an amazing person, first and foremost, and her name is Dr. Jodi Richardson, and we'd like to welcome her now. Everyone give a clapping emoji.
Hi, Neil.
Hi, Jodi. How you doing?
Great, thank you. Yeah, really well. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Thanks so much for making time for us. We really appreciate it. Now, for those people that have just joined us, welcome. We want you to put not your name, your name's already there, but we want you to put your state and also how many children you have. Where are you watching this broadcast from? It would just be good to do that. Put an emoji there, whatever you want to do. That'd be great. Now, the other thing we want to let you know is that this book here is Dr. Jodi Richardson's book, and Anxious Kids, How Children Can Turn Their Anxiety into Resilience. And we have a special opportunity for you to win this book by just liking, sharing, and tagging this particular live and sharing it. And you can go into the draw. We'll be drawing this tonight, and you can get this, and you will get a personal letter from Jodi to send that out. and you can be inspired as well. I've got this book because it has been so inspiring. I first saw Jodi, and I first met her at the Resilient Kids Conference just over a year ago, and what a privilege that was to hear you there. Are you missing being at those conferences this year?
I am. I really am, because it gives you such a lovely opportunity to connect with an audience and to talk with parents. But I've got my home studio set up, and I've been delivering a lot of presentations, engaging with people online, which has been a very close second.
Haven't we all had to adapt, hey? We've all had to adapt to this whole live Zoom. I think, honestly, I've used nearly every different platform. Today I was on a group thing. I don't even know what you call it, but it was a workshop where you'd break out rooms. It wasn't Zoom, it was another one. And I hadn't used that one before. And I was like, far out. How many are there here? It's absolutely ridiculous. Now we're going to jump into this topic. We are talking about anxiety, how to parent anxious kids. And you have a story around this, and I want to give you the opportunity to share your own personal story so that other parents can get the context of why you actually wrote this book, and also wrote about this particular topic. Would you mind doing that, Jodi?
Oh, of course, Neil. I wouldn't mind at all. When Michael Gross and I connected a couple of years ago, and we went out for a coffee, he said, "What's the dream?" I said, "To write the book I wish my parents and my teachers had when I was an anxious kid." And my anxiety symptoms started when I was 4 years old in prep. Wow. I was in a class with 53 other preps and 2 teachers. It was a very stressful environment. The teachers were very firm. They yelled a lot. It was a bit like herding cats, I'm sure. And for me, who had a very peaceful home, I grew up with an anxious mum, so I had to manage that, but I was only 4. So, for me, going into that environment was very stressful, and it really did trigger anxiety in me. So I wasn't diagnosed for about 20 years. I was diagnosed with anxiety after going to the GP, suffering with depression. Okay. And I think living with the anxiety was just normal life for me. I didn't really realise there was anything particularly wrong. The depression was a result of untreated anxiety. And I sit for you now as a 46-year-old who still has an anxiety disorder, but my anxiety disorder is very well managed. And I'm really excited to share a lot of the strategies that I use myself here with everyone today.
Wow. Thank you so much for being so vulnerable today. I think in this time, especially, a lot of parents are more anxious than they've ever been in their entire life, I reckon. And I think that you being able to share your story as a parent, and you've got young kids, of what that actually is like. And so we just wanted to shift, I guess. We are talking about how to parent anxious kids, but also I think how to parent anxious kids is actually how to manage your own personal anxiety as well. And I think that's incredibly powerful. One thing we want to invite people to do is that as Jodi speaks, and as I share as well, we want to invite you to react and respond with emojis, all right? Because that's the thing. You're not in a room with us, but we want you to feel like you are. So if you're happy about something, put a happy face. If you're sad about something, put a sad face. You want to clap if you want to put a confused face, whatever you want. The other thing is we wanted to let you know is that after this, we are going to have a Q&A with Jodi, and she's given even more time to be able to do that. So you can actually start putting questions around this particular topic. And after this session, after the pre-empted questions that we've had conversation, we will be having conversation about, we want to invite you to share your questions. And thank you again, Jodi. So let's jump into this, okay? You've shared a bit of your story, but there's probably a lot of things that parents are struggling with at the moment around children. And I guess the first question is, and I know there's so many different analogies and things like that, but I need to ask you, what is anxiety and how can you tell that your kids might be anxious?
Yeah, it's the most important question to start with, because we need to know whether or not we're looking at kids in our family or in our classrooms, if teachers tuning in today, whether or not they're experiencing the normal anxiety, the normal human emotion, or whether or not their anxiety might be spilling over into becoming more of a problem. And yeah, like you said before, I really do invite everyone who's watching to consider their own stress and anxiety levels as well, because we know anxiety is contagious, and if we are highly anxious in our own homes, then our kids can catch it from us, and it really does impact on everyone. So what is anxiety? Well, anxiety is actually a normal human emotion, and it's designed to keep us safe. So we start to feel a bit anxious when, if we're driving along and we see a stray dog sort of walking along the road, or a dog that isn't where it's meant to be, and we start to sort of feel a bit anxious and worried about the likelihood of that dog running on the road. Well, that's our fight or flight system. That's our body's safety response kicking in to really gear us up to take action, to, avoid danger for ourselves or for someone that we love, or an animal that we care about in this instance. Yeah. And so what anxiety is it's our brain and our body's response in anticipation of a threat.
Yeah.
And so I'll give you a different example. And this is a true story. When I was a kid, my brother and I used to get 25 cents each Friday to walk to the milk bar and get 25 1-cent lollies. Those were the days. And we used to cut, we used to cut through a vacant block of land to get to the milk bar. And there were magpies. And I'll never forget the day that I was swooped. And I was so fearful, and I reacted out of fear because there was a genuine threat to my safety. So that's a fear response. The next time, the next week after that had happened, I was anxious because I was anticipating the same event happening. And that's our body's response to protect us, so that we're on high alert, and our physiology changes in a way that prepares us to fight for our safety or to flee and keep us safe. So that's what anxiety is, and we need it. We need it to protect us. It's a type of genetic wisdom. However, oftentimes that anxiety response kicks on when there isn't, a genuine threat. The threat could be imagined, it could be perceived, and if that response is ticking on when not necessary, or not settling down after a stressful event has passed, then it can start to become a bit more of a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And can you just give us the science side of things? What happens in our brain? Why does, I guess, your brain remember the fear? What is going on in our brain that causes anxiety?
Yeah, I will. And I haven't forgotten to answer your other question too about signs and symptoms. So we'll come to that next. Yeah. So in the brain, we have a region of our brain called the amygdala, and it's good to liken it to our body's smoke alarm, if you like. And so, in our home, our smoke alarms are there to keep us safe. Our amygdala is there to keep us safe from threat and danger. And so what happens is the amygdala takes in information from our environment. So what we see, what we hear, sometimes it can be what we touch or what touches us. If we have something sort of crawling along our arm and all of a sudden we jump and react very quickly, the amygdala is taking in that information and is very quickly deciding what to do with it. Is it a threat, in which case the fight or flight system is activated, or is it something that's innocuous, not a problem? And so when information is taken in and it's deemed to be a potential threat, then a whole cascade of changes are triggered to gear us up and power us up to be able to respond to that threat, to stay safe. And the sympathetic nervous system is the nervous system that is predominant under these circumstances. And that's fight, flight, or freeze. And most people are pretty familiar with that expression. And so when the brain detects danger, it switches on this cascade of events, a lot of chemical changes, the neurochemical changes, physiological changes that actually result in the symptoms, which I'll come to in a moment. And when you understand what's happening to keep us safe and pair that with what signs and symptoms we see, it tends to make a lot of sense. One of the other things that you mentioned was about memory. And when we are highly emotional or very anxious, then the memories are embedded quite strongly, so that next time we are faced with that same situation, we can draw on that experience. And so, many of us who've experienced, big emotional events in our lives will remember them quite clearly, where we were, what we were doing. And that's, again, an evolutionarily protective mechanism that we have.
Yeah, so that's really interesting, because you think about that whole standing in front of a classroom. There's this whole thing around, if you're standing in front of a classroom, you're telling your story, or you're telling, you're doing a project, and you're standing up there and things like that. If it goes well, then the next time you go, oh, it's going to go well. But actually, if it doesn't go well and you forget your lines or whatever it is, then next time you go up, your memory goes, hang on a sec, you need to be freaking out right now, because it's probably going to go the same way. Is that the sort of thing you're talking about?
Yeah, well, that's one of them for sure. So if we have an experience, and certainly speaking publicly is something that does evoke a lot of anxiety in people, and the normal reaction is to feel anxious, and it's very motivating too. It does give us an opportunity to really be driven to prepare well to help minimize that anxiety. But under normal circumstances, that anxiety settles down once the presentation is done. But if it doesn't go well, then the brain says, oh, see, I told you there was a reason to be anxious. There is a problem here. And then the next time you come to do that same behavior, then those memories are there, the physical reaction and the psychological reactions take place, and, back comes the anxiety, and sometimes it's elevated. And that's why avoidance is so common when it comes to anxiety, is it doesn't feel very nice. It feels pretty awful, in fact. And so there's a lot of avoidance associated with anxiety, because, if you don't have to do it and you don't have to feel that way, why would you? But that sees people missing out on a lot.
So it's absolutely. And so obviously we're in this time of, COVID, and there's heightened anxiety and things like that. I know with my children personally, when they're acting out, maybe I think to myself, is that actually what they're going through because of, their brother stole the TV controller or whatever it is? Is that really what's going on? Or is it actually because of the anxiety that's been built through this circumstance? I mean, what are the signs around, how can you tell if my children are anxious? Now, we want to be very clear on the fact that today we're not talking about if you have an anxiety disorder, like that could be the case, but we're actually talking about that all children do experience anxiety in some form in their life. And so how do we tell that children are anxious?
Yeah, so you're exactly right to say that, in that, yes, anxiety is very normal. We all experience it. It's a completely normal part of life, and all emotions are okay. All behaviours are not. That's a truism. However, when it comes to anyone who's watching today, if you are asking the question as to whether or not you think the anxiety might be spilling over from sort of the normal anxious response to circumstances into something that's becoming more of a problem, there are a few things to look out for before I'll talk about the signs and symptoms. And that is the anxiety becoming problematic? Is it not settling down after an anxious event or an anxiety-provoking event? Is it starting to impact with their general well-being and happiness? Is it becoming extreme, and is it impacting other members of the family as well? So there's some questions to ask, and if you're not sure, or you're even asking the question, I highly recommend heading to the GP to have a conversation about sort of where things are at. So in terms of signs and symptoms, it's good to break them into three main categories. And so I like to talk about how anxiety impacts how we think, how we feel, and what we do, how kids think, feel, and what they do, of course, as well. So in terms of thinking, and going back to the brain, so the amygdala is the part of the brain that is sort of like our smoke alarm. It sounds the alarm if there's, potential danger. And yet the part of our brain that helps us to regulate and self-regulate is the prefrontal cortex, which is the large part of the brain here at the front, behind the forehead. When we are anxious, any of us, no matter what age, the prefrontal cortex becomes unavailable. And it's the part of the brain that helps us think rationally, solve problems, make good decisions, and self-regulate. And so when we are anxious, we cannot think straight. So if you've got an anxious little one or big one that you're working with and they're struggling with their schoolwork, learning can really be affected. So the priority there is really to help to calm the anxiety, to help that part of the brain come back online and be available. The reason it's not available is because under threatening circumstances, when the body has to immediately go into fight or flight for life-saving reasons, problem-solving, thinking, rationalising part of the brain would really cost a lot of time. And so that's why it's offline and unavailable. So thinking is really affected. And other ways thinking is affected is lots of worries. Lots and lots of worries is a classic sign of anxiety. And I wonder if people might give a bit of a thumbs up if you are a worrywart, were a worrywart, or know someone who is. Maybe you parent one or teach one. Lots of what if questions. So what if this happens? What if that happens? It's a lot of future thinking. Yeah. And again, looking at that future thinking, we know mindfulness to be really powerful in helping to settle and calm an anxious mind. And again, it helps to prevent some of those. The future thinking becomes catastrophic. It's often worst case scenario. So, that's some of the ways in which thinking can be affected. It's obviously very difficult to concentrate and it's difficult actually to learn and to remember. And so thinking's affected in lots of different ways. Yeah. In terms of feeling, so the second category, in terms of feeling, we're impacted in terms of the way we feel physically as well as the way we feel emotionally. So emotionally, there can be a lot of really big feelings. So maybe lots of tears or lots of anger or big emotions that are amplified and possibly out of proportion to the circumstances. Like you were saying before, Neil, is this related to the remote control or is there something else going on here? Yeah. And so those big feelings result because the part of the brain that is this amygdala, this smoke alarm, is also the emotional processing center of the brain. So I get teary when I get really anxious. I just want to cry, and that's my default. Some will become more feel enraged and angry, and that's more the fight side of the fight or flight. So hopefully that's starting to sort of fall into place. Yeah. In terms of how we feel physically, the reaction to an anxiety response is so physical that, and often the symptoms we feel physically are misinterpreted and can cause more alarm if you don't understand when you're experiencing them, that they're just a part of your anxiety. So some of the symptoms include a racing heart, a really racing heart. And the reason the heart races is to pump more oxygenated blood to the large muscle groups for fight or flight. Breathing rate changes. And one of my first early symptoms as a child was I'd go to mum and I'd say, I can't get a full breath. Mum, I can't get a full breath. And I wasn't able to get that right balance of oxygen and carbon dioxide. And so I'd yawn a lot as well. And again, that's bringing in more oxygen to fuel us for that life-saving fight or flight response. Blood is diverted from the digestive system into, again, our large muscle groups because digestion isn't a life-saving function under threat, nor is reproduction, incidentally. And so for highly anxious women, reproduction can be a challenge, fertility can be a challenge because reproduction is sort of dialed back whilst we're highly anxious and under threat. So upset tummies, feeling really sick, feeling like you want to vomit, they're all really natural physical symptoms that come from anxiety because the blood is quickly moved away from that system. We can tremble, and that's as a result of the adrenaline that's pumping through our system. And that can be worrying because, sometimes when there's the shakiness, if it's not recognised as a symptom of anxiety, and it's not always, of course, it can be a symptom of other things, but when you're anxious, these are a lot of the signs that you can experience. We can also have a lot of perspiration, and that's because the body's about to get really hot. We're about to do a lot of movement to protect ourselves, and so the cooling needs to switch on. So perspiration starts to switch on too. And lastly, in terms of behaviour avoidance, a lot of behaviour that might be out of character, amplified behaviour that's out of proportion to the circumstances, and really just basically, digging heels in and not wanting to go forward with whatever it is that's causing the anxiety. So hopefully that's given a really good, well-rounded view of what happens.
Absolutely, it has. And look, we've got a lot of people joining us at the moment. We've got people we will say hello to people from Ormiston in Brisbane, Victoria, Melbourne, Burnie in Tasmania, Sydney. So all over Australia right now, they're listening to this important conversation. And, I think the more and more I listen to you, you're so easy to listen to, but the more and more I listen to you, it's reminding me that how incredible we're made up, like sweating and stuff like that. You're like, oh, you're ready to go kind of thing. And, our body's there. And I think that's really important as parents because, this as well as I do. They didn't come out with a manual, right? So we have to learn on the go, even though we'd like them to come out with a manual. Hey, Mum, I'm here.
Yeah.
But the thing is that it is so important what you're saying. And I think in this time here, I want you to share what are some things that can come out of our mouth when children are anxious. How can we help them in this time of uncertainty?
I chuckle a little bit because we have a bit of a running joke here in this house because I've been anxious for a very long time, of course, really most of my life. And I've been married for a long time, and my husband used to say, calm down. And we hear that all the time on movies and on television shows. And I've gone, never thought of that one. We have a little bit of a running joke because calm down isn't actually helpful. We would love to be calm. And what we need to do when we're really anxious is not think about what we need to do to be calm, but we need to actually take action. We have to actually do things to show our brain that we're safe and to help calm that anxiety. So what anxious kids and adults need is somebody to maybe remind them to take some deep breaths, and we'll talk about strategies in a moment. Take some deep breaths, which really shows that part of the brain that we are safe. It starts to settle our system and starts to bring the other the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest system. We want that one to be, in the fore and running the show. In terms of what we can say, not saying calm down is definitely on the to-don't list. What we can do, which is really powerful, is to validate for anxious kids how they're feeling. And this goes with any feelings. All feelings are okay. And I think sometimes the distress we feel when our children are upset or anxious can prompt us to want to tell them all the reasons why they shouldn't feel the way they do. And when in fact what they really need from us is that validation and that empathy to say, I can see you're feeling really nervous at the moment. I can see you're really worried, and I understand, I've been in a situation like that and I'd be worried too. And just really letting them know that you've heard them. And, we know as adults, if we try to say how we feel and someone tries to tell us why we should feel differently, we don't feel heard. And so validation is the most important thing to start with.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's super important because I think, when I think about my own childhood and when I was anxious and worried and things like that, if my parents said, it's going to be okay, I'm with you, or I'm supporting you, or something like that, you know, I always wish that I would get that, instead of, you know, get out of my way, get out of the, you know, get out of this, you know, you'll be all right, like, just the attitude. I think that tone of voice is so critical about, and also about what we say. I know as a parent, anxiety is huge within the closeness of family and friends and things like that. And I know there's lots of questions that I have if I was just listening to this, and I'm sure there's heaps of other parents out there as well. So I want to encourage you to ask questions, because we are having a Q&A after this. So if you've been sitting here going, I really want to ask Jodi this question, but I'm just not sure, be bold and courageous and ask that question, because now could be that perfect time that could change the course of the way you parent your child. So the other question that I had was, what are some simple steps parents can help their children do when they're anxious? So one thing you said breathing, and I know that with my own son, helping to understand what, you know, he could taste and he could smell and those sort of things helps to do that. But I do find, and I think it's important to say this, I do find that when they're in the height of anxiety, you can't rub their back, you can't go anywhere near them. Like it's like there's absolutely no comprehension of anyone else in the room. They just are so focused on that anxiety. So how do we cut through that? So I'm asking a few questions here, but it's what are some simple steps for parents when they are anxious, and how do we actually cut through when it feels like there's no end in sight?
Yeah, it can be really difficult, and it's distressing to watch. You know, it's really hard as
Absolutely.
It's so hard to see our kids upset, anxious, and stressed, and we want to end the stress. And one of the things that you know we can work on ourselves as parents is being able and willing to sit with acceptance in the face of difficult feelings and emotions and thoughts as well sometimes, and having that willingness just to sit and just say, look, I know you're feeling really whatever feeling it is, frustrated, anxious, stressed, and just be prepared to sit with them through it, and for them to know that you are there. We talk about sort of striking while the iron's cold to teach a lot of skills when it comes to managing anxiety, and so that means practicing strategies in between anxious episodes, not waiting till an anxious episode to just, you know, throw in a new idea, because remember that prefrontal cortex isn't available, and so there's not going to be any new learning or any problem solving. It's not the time to talk about what's happening. It's a time to say, look, really these are the things to do. Recognize that it's anxiety, if it is anxiety, and you will have more of an idea now knowing the signs and symptoms. Validate. So really validate how the child's feeling, and then prompt them to, if you can, do some deep diaphragmatic breathing. And so that's not just the short high breath up in, high in the throat and the lungs. We need the deep full breathing, because this is actually the way it's a relaxation response, and it's the control that we have over this part of the nervous system to help to start to calm that anxious response. Some kids will need exercise. Exercise is actually the natural end to the fight or flight response. And, you think about me being swooped by a magpie as a little kid, I bolted. I absolutely bolted. And that was my flight. And then my whole system was wound up. Then my whole system can calm down. I have brought an end to the fight or flight response by doing something. Yet so often when we're anxious, kids can be in bed. They can be sitting at their desk. They can be, on the couch, or not moving. And so some kids in that moment, so I'm talking about that really highly anxious moment. Yeah. Get them to do their breathing or get them moving. And that could be a walk out and a talk, or giving them a basketball to bounce, or just getting them to jog on the spot for 30 seconds or skip or anything helps to sort of dissipate all of the changes that have occurred. So in that moment, once it starts to settle, and it can take a little while because the whole physiology needs to settle down, then towards the end of that period, that highly anxious period, then that you can keep them working on their breathing and perhaps even introduce a mindfulness strategy, which could be just stand still for a moment and pay attention to everything that you can hear. And in doing that, they're starting to tune into what's around them, which brings that thinking away from the threat, away from that future worry or whatever it was that triggered the anxiety, bringing them back into the moment, which again helps to settle their system. So they're 3 key strategies, and hopefully I've given you an indication as to why they're so effective.
No, that's fantastic. I think that's super important. And like I said, like this is close to my heart, and as a dad, and I've seen exactly what you're talking about. In my situation, I probably wouldn't give him a basketball, but
you might wear it.
I might wear it. Yeah, that's right. But the fear. I mean, you talked about birds, right? But I mean, there's throwing up, there's dogs, there's a whole bunch of things. And what I've found is that a lot of people with anxiety, they actually often connect with 3 or 4 different fears, I guess we're starting to get some questions coming through, and I will be answering those in the Q&A. You will be anyway. I'll be asking those in the Q&A. Stick with us. We've just got a couple more questions we want to get through before the Q&A. How can parents turn anxiousness into resilience? How can they turn anxiety into resilience? Because I know that is a core topic of your book. So I think this is really important, and I think it's a good kind of segue to move into that, because the reality is we don't want children and parents to stay in a state of anxiety, do we? And we don't want to just it to happen and then nothing be learnt from it. So then if it happens again, they don't have any coping mechanisms. So how do we turn children's anxiety into resilience?
One of the ways, first of all, to provide a definition of resilience, we hear about it all the time, and resilience is adapting well to challenge and change. And, anxiety presents a challenge. There's no question. And so when we have children who are anxious, one of the things that we need to do is educate them. We need to educate them about their brain. And Karen Young, who has Hey Sigmund, has written an amazing book called Hey Warrior. And it's a really beautifully illustrated book for younger children, or for any age, really. It's a great illustrated book about anxiety and what happens, and how the amygdala's role is to keep us safe, but sometimes it's a little bit overprotective. She's got a beautiful way about her. And so that's a really great thing to do. Also in our book, Anxious Kids, we've got scripts to teach primary school, and there's a secondary school script as well to teach kids about their brain. So number one, they understand that they need to know that they are not broken, that they are not faulty, that they have something that happens in their brain that's completely understood and is manageable with the right strategies. So first of all, building that resilience helps them. We build resilience by educating them. Secondly, teaching them what matters, what helps in the moment. And then once they've tried these strategies, getting them to reflect on how much of a difference it made for them. So, for example, I'll give you a new strategy as well as I share this example.
Sure.
We use a strategy called dropping anchor, and I use this for myself, and I've taught this to the kids as well. I've got the 2 kids. And it comes from the work of Dr. Russ Harris. Highly recommend looking into his work. And the acronym for it is ACE, A-C-E.
Yeah.
The dropping anchor method requires, the A is acknowledgement of how you're feeling. So it's not a distraction technique. We're not trying to avoid how we're feeling. We're acknowledging that we don't feel good, that we feel anxious, or whatever feeling it is, and practicing acceptance of that in the moment, knowing that feelings always pass. The C is about coming back into your body. So this is another mindfulness practice. And so we stand on the floor and we feel our feet on the floor, and we picture them dropping anchors like roots down into the floor. And we pay attention to how our body feels, how our clothes feel on our back, and, how our arms feel against our sides, or we stretch, or we hold our hands and we notice all of those different feelings. The E part of the acronym is about re-engaging in what was happening. So the thing about anxiety is it stops us from doing the things in life that matter because we want to avoid. So the E is about re-engage. What can I do now? What action can I take that's meaningful for me? Is it getting back to the study I was doing that caused this anxiety? Is it sending an apology to someone if there was a set of circumstances that provoked it? If you've introduced that strategy, once the anxiety's settled down, it's really good to go back with the child and reflect and say, how did that make you feel? What did you notice when we did that? Was that helpful for you? And what they learn and the resilience that they develop over time is through recognizing that I can actually take some action, I can manage my anxiety, and I know what works for me, and I have the choice when I'm feeling anxious with practice to start to put some of my skills into place and that optimism and hope to know that I can manage this and it's not going to stop me from doing what's really important for me. So they're just some of the ways that we can help build resilience. I couldn't encourage you more to share stories of adversity and overcoming adversity, exercise, and also really boosting relationships, because kids, like all of us, need to be well connected, and never has there been a time where we're more disconnected physically. So we really need to make efforts to keep kids connected with friends, family, teachers, and loved ones.
Wow. I mean, you're getting a lot of clapping emojis. You're getting a lot of thumbs up. Like, this is obviously hitting the spot for parents, and it's definitely hitting the spot for me. I think that's the thing. I think when you're in the midst of all this anxiety, both externally but also internally, with all the things that are going on and with your children struggling and those sorts of things, it's so easy to feel like I'm never going to learn anything from this. It's always going to be the same. When I spoke to my son about anxiety, I asked him what it felt like. And he said, Dad, it's like sitting in a round room without any windows or doors or any light, with no way out. Like, there's no way to get out. He said that's what it feels like in the height. And like, he's only a young boy, and this is what it feels like to him. And my heart broke, to be honest with you. I just thought, far out, how would that feel for a young boy to be that fear? I'm getting emotional actually, but that feeling of a no way out situation. I think what you're doing with the tools that you're giving us is able to maybe be that hand that reaches in and opens the door on our side, because sometimes they feel like that, can't get through. And I think that's really powerful. We live in a world of social media, and there was a study done in UK that actually said that young people didn't feel, as in this is teenagers, didn't feel like they were loved or that they were cared for if they didn't get a minimum of 75 likes on their Instagram or Facebook posts and things like that. How can parents, this is the last question before we go to Q&A, how can parents protect their children from the anxiety of social media?
This is a big challenge for all of us, because self-esteem, when children's self-esteem is directly linked to the external appreciation that is shown or isn't shown through their social media channels, it can very much affect how they feel about themselves. And it can also create a great sense of anticipation and a lot of comparison. Now, comparison is very natural. Again, it's an evolutionary mechanism that we use to sort of make sure, are we pulling our weight? Are we doing things right? Are we still welcome as part of the group, part of the tribe? So comparisons are very natural. However, if our kids' self-esteem is linked to their social media, then it can cause some troubles. And so what we can do under those circumstances is really boost their self-esteem. And we can do that by asking them, what are you good at? And really emphasizing time off screens so that that part of their life is only a small part of their life. It's not the only lifeline that they have to the world and to affirmation, and to identify their character strengths. And the VIA character website has an evidence-based, incredibly interesting, actually, survey whereby parents can get their kids to go on and identify their character strengths and adopt a strengths-based approach to parenting, whereby we're utilizing our kids' greatest strengths in the way that
I love that.
Yeah, and that's through the work of Professor Lee Waters has the Strength Switch, a great book I highly recommend. So building their self-esteem and helping them to recognize what they're good at and who they are, why they're loved, and what they can contribute to the world. And that's really another big one, in that we feel great about ourselves when we're doing things for others. So if we can help take their focus away from themselves and onto others, that's another really great way to help protect against some of those difficulties. The work of Dr. Christy Goodwin and Martine Oglethorpe is also excellent in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really great because I did actually want to also share that Mark Zuckerberg, and he took away all the numbers of likes that people could see, and my heart broke in some ways. And I think it's so weird that in this day and age we're thinking about this, but the fact that that would have dropped or heightened the anxiety, but dropped their self-esteem in a big way when they couldn't see how many people and those sorts of things. And I don't know whether Mark Zuckerberg had a bad day or something, decided to do this, or whether he was actually trying to reverse the damage that had been caused by social media. But I think you're right. One thing you did say there, and I know you just touched on it, is they need to regulate their screen time. And also don't let anyone that is under the age of 13 years old be on social media, be it TikTok or anything like that. And you can go to our Facebook page, you can see a bunch of stuff there, but also on our website on those things. So thank you so much for sharing these. I mean, literally we could be talking all day, but let's get into the Q&A. There's a bunch of questions. I do want to précis this as well, that if you want to win this this amazing book, I'm trying to get in the camera, you have to like, share, and tag your friends, and you can go into the draw to win that book, and we'll pick someone tonight, and then Jodi will send it out to you. And also, if we don't get to your questions, because we only have about 15 minutes, then Jodi will answer those questions after this and reply and give you those answers. That's okay?
Yes, yeah, not a problem. What I'll invite people to is I'll answer them on Instagram. So follow me on Instagram and I'll answer your questions.
Absolutely. And
that way other people, that way other people have access to that same information.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Yep. All right. So let me just, there's a couple of comments here I've got. First one, I think this is going to make your head swell, which is good. When I told my son I was watching this, he uses your strategies and said, Mum, I don't really have it anymore. It's because he does use those tools when he feels anxious. So well done. For one, sharing it, but also for them. That was Alison. So that's really cool. The other one, no, that's just phenomenal. There was another comment here. Said sometimes when I validate my daughter's feelings that I'm telling her that she can't cope in this situation. Have you got any comments on that?
Yeah, it'd be good to have a little bit more information, but when our kids are feeling whatever it is they're feeling, the validation is about the feeling and letting them know that it's okay to feel the way they do in that moment. There are no wrong feelings. And I think that's a really strong message that as parents that we need to send our kids. And also though, depending on how they're feeling, that we don't have to wait till we feel amazing to do what matters as well. So I would just be conscious that, if your little one is feeling anxious, if they know what that word is, or maybe you have there's a lot of nuanced language we can use around it, nervous, a sense of anticipation, butterflies in the tummy. It's really just about sending that message that however you feel is okay, and knowing that feelings will pass. And so I hope that that's helpful. it's hard not knowing a little bit more.
Sure. And I think also it's that it is validating that. It's also saying, you know what, it might feel like right now you can't cope in this situation, but I'm here right now with you. And so, and you can, and what you said, you know, being able to talk through those things. There's an interesting question here. They said, is there anything that we can do to prevent our kids from anxiety disorders? Any tips to commence really early on, like 0 to 5 age group? Is there any tricks and tips that we could do to prevent that when all of our neurological development is occurring?
Yeah, so definitely what's important to know is that there is a hereditary component to anxiety. So 30 to 50% of those of us that have anxiety will have a hereditary component. So that means we have the coding in our DNA for an anxiety challenge in our lives, but the environment, what happens in our environment, may or may not switch on those genes. So we can have the genes for something in the same way that we have the genes, we all have the genes ready there to be switched on to grow very strong and reasonably big muscles. But if we don't do the resistance exercise, that ain't going to happen. Nope. So it's good to know that, you know, the environment certainly does play a role. And so the things that influence anxiety are going to be the genetic makeup, brain chemistry, lifestyle, outside events, and not all of those are in our control. So what can we do to support our children to have really strong foundations when it comes to their mental health? Number one is to build their emotional intelligence. So help them develop a really strong vocabulary around emotions. And there's lots of great online resources for that. Yeah, very much so. So helping them by saying, oh, you're feeling frustrated. You know, when they're really little, you know, one of our kids looked at a photo album and had that sort of, you know, that sadness that can come over you. And I said, you're feeling nostalgia. This is a feeling that, you know, that you wouldn't have probably come across before. And so it's up to us to help boost their vocabulary. So when they are experiencing an emotion, they've got really great skills to express it. And there's a really great acronym from the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence called RULER. And I'll run through it quickly. Recognize, understand, label, express, and regulate. That's one thing that we can do for young children, and make habits of good mental health part of your lifestyle. So teaching them mindfulness, teaching them belly breathing, and there's lots of great apps, Smiling Mind in particular, and really being open in terms of communication about all things when it comes to emotions in your home.
Fantastic. And so when it comes to anxiety, right, I've got a teen boy too, but how do you start a conversation with a teen boy who actually thinks they don't need any help, that they've got things under control? We live in a world, don't we? We live in a world where the whole male testosterone and I'm the tough guy and Dermot Brereton, Hawthorn football player, can play a grand final in 3 broken ribs and we go fantastic, instead of you're a clown. What are you thinking? You need to get some help with your physical side. We do that same thing with emotional, don't we? And so we try to do that. And I don't know if there's been modelling in the home that maybe the dad is projecting that. I don't know, but I mean, how do you talk to a teen boy about this stuff?
Look, it is a challenging one if it's not been sort of the modus operandum of the house, and that, you know, that, like you say, about the role modelling. And often what we can do is, it's about leading a horse to water sometimes, and I think we have to get a bit clever sometimes. But, you know, if we know, I guess at the end of the day, you know, one of the questions that I ask, and I don't ask this of the kids, but I ask the parents to think about this, is what is it costing them? So if, you know, there's a great deal of anxiety in, say, a 15-year-old boy, and then, you know, has that come, you know, we don't need to sort of think about where that's come from. But if there's a, you know, as a parent, you can see that, and yet they're not recognizing that there's something that they can get help with, sometimes it's about sort of leading them to water and sort of sharing some ideas about your own anxieties and getting the dad or another male role model to do the same, and just to kind of keep it fairly light, I felt like this, and, you know, just starting to plant some seeds of that emotional kind of communication in the home, and also thinking, you know, helping them to see it from the point of view that, well, if they're feeling like this and it's affecting them in this way, how would they be able to move on in doing the things that are really important to them if they did feel differently? So sometimes it's about kind of selling the outcome and not necessarily trying to sort of put a label on it or anything like that. The role modeling and helping them to sort of see the benefits in getting help are some of the ways to approach that. It's quite difficult.
Well, there's actually a lot of questions around teenagers. So I think this is something that is really interesting. I mean, do you have any, just to continue on that, do you have any strategies around, engaging teen boys who've actually successfully implemented strategies to prevent anxiety but have potentially withdrawn a bit too far?
So for children who, look, what we know about these strategies is that they make a meaningful difference to how you feel. And so that's the reinforcing factor. And so I think, I've had a lot of parents ask me in the past about, they've tried so hard to get their kids to do certain things and make decisions or try new ideas. And look, at the end of the day, we can't actually make them do any of it. What we can do is create opportunities, keep open communication, educate them, and potentially connect them. If they're not going to take on board that information from us, connect them with the people that they might take the information from. And sometimes that can be, one of their other male role models, opening a conversation or going away for a camping weekend with dad and, setting aside some time to really sort of be able to talk comfortably about how they're feeling, right through to Dr. Arne Rubinstein, the Rites of Passage Institute, has incredible father-son experiences and rites of passage where what boys learn on those experiences, and you can do this in your house as well, is that they're not alone. Lots of other young men are going through the same. And young men and women, teenage girls and boys do need some sort of a rite of passage and do need to see that everybody goes through challenges, and talking about overcoming them is other lessons that they can learn from.
Yeah, I used to have a home gym and I used to invite at-risk young people round, and we had it all sorted and protected and things like that. But what I found is that when I was holding the boxing bag, that's when these young people would actually tell me what's really going on. They'd be hitting the bag. And I've found that, especially for male, is that when they're doing something, they open up about things, whether it's doing weights or whether it's going for a run with them or whether it's boxing or whether it's walking, whatever it is. I think it's the exertion of energy or exertion of the exercise that causes the emotion to come flourishing out. Do you know what I mean?
I do. And not sitting opposite a boy, sitting side by side and doing something with them can sometimes give them that comfortability to start to open up as well.
So I've got one last question for you, and then we need to say goodbye, unfortunately. It's just been such a good time. I mean, someone just wrote then that they're going to have to watch this again. I feel I'm going to have to watch this again. This is amazing. So the last question I have for you is that school refusal is a consequence of anxiety in our house. We have worked extensively on this, and COVID and remote learning, I feel, has destroyed my last 4 years of work around this area. How do we get the strength to do it all again when the child themselves does not want to work on this at all? I mean, this is a final and probably toughest question. Why don't we save the best for last?
Goodness me. Look, my heart really does go out to, anyone who's parenting a child whose anxiety has been amplified as a result of COVID for good reason. There is a threat all around us. It's uncertain, it's ongoing, and it's very natural for that to have amplified pre-existing anxieties and to create new challenges for people.
Yeah.
Under these circumstances, what I would start by doing is to write a big list of all of your successes.
Yeah.
I would start by looking at what the circumstances were when you started and where you got to and all of the little milestones along the way. So I think a celebration of successes when you've had such a long road and there's another road unfolding before you, I think that's a really nice way to start. I'd give yourself a bit of a breather. I'd take, a couple of weeks off thinking about it and planning for it, because we're all in home learning, at the moment. And that's, I imagine, ongoing for at least a number of weeks. And then, not knowing the age of the child, but, school refusal is a serious challenge for families. If you don't already, I would certainly engage the input of your GP and a psychologist to get help. There are some excellent resources online, but what I would do is I would work with the child, and knowing that with the idea of that anxiety can put such a stop sign in our lives and can stand in the way, knowing that we can still feel anxious and do what matters. We don't have to wait till all of our ducks are in a row to be able to move forward. And I think this is a lesson for all of us, no matter what age, and for our kids, to know that we can feel frustrated, disappointed, sad, lonely, anxious, worried, but we can still actually put one foot in front of the other and move towards what's important. So when we're waiting for everything to be rosy, we can wait a very long time. So I think if you can start to embed that idea in your family and put that into practice, that might help a little as well. But I do wish you all the very, very best. And I hope that you can reach out and get some support for your own mental health and wellbeing, and take good care of yourself as well, because it's not easy.
Wow. Look, you are an amazing human being, and there is so much love on this on the Facebook Live for you. You have done an amazing job, and I know that this does take a lot out of you. I mean, you've done your doctorate and you've written a book and things like that, but still downloading this information in this time as well. I just want to say a massive thank you. We all want to say thank you, and we want to thank everyone for joining us. Don't go anywhere. You will be, Jodi, but don't go anywhere, everyone, because there's a couple of things I wanted to share with you. Let's give Jodi a massive hand with lots of clapping emojis. Thank you, Jodi. We'll see you later on. Thank you again for everything.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you. Bye.
Bye. So everyone, this is the book here. You can win this by just liking, sharing, and tagging your friends this particular live. That would be absolutely fantastic. And you go into the draw. So we'll pick one tonight, and you could get that book. And you can see by the comments that everyone has said this book has really changed our life in the way we've helped our children with anxiety and helped in anxious moments. I wanted to let you know as well, just to make sure that you head to Child Safe Australia-for Parents, and we'll allow you to be in that group so we can support you. And there's different experts that will be putting information in there as well. So I want to do that. I want to let you know as well that you can still donate if you want to as well. childsafe.org.au/live. You can do that. And also next, we do this every month, right? And so the next one, we actually have a really different type of one, and that is that we want you to bring your children to this event. Okay, it's called, it's with CEO of Mindful Oz, Matt Runnels, on how to help our children understand and deal with their emotions. So this is a really important one, how to help our children understand and deal with their emotions, and bring your children along to this one. We're going to be talking with him, but he's going to be addressing you and your children of how to look forward to that. So the event is in our Facebook page. You can check it out. We're going to go. We want you to have a really great night. We look forward to seeing you at the next event. Thank you so much for participating and giving up your time. We look forward to seeing you next month. Take care. See ya.